Love Letter to the Earth number 6. Our Journey of Eons. Dear Mother, the moon is a part of you, as beautiful as an angel. She is a kind sister to you, always following you, helping you slow down and keep your balance, and creating tidal rhythms in your body. Our entire solar system is one family, revolving around Father Sun in a joyful and harmonious dance. First, there is Mercury, metallic and cratered, closest to the Sun. Next is Venus, with her intense heat, high-pressure atmosphere, and volcanoes. Then there is you, beloved Mother Earth, the most beautiful of all. Beyond us orbits the red planet, cold and desolate Mars. And after the asteroid belt, there comes the gas giant Jupiter.
Welcome, I'm Addison Brown with co-host Marley Alabanza, and this is the Emerging World Project podcast, What Are You Doing Here? We're going to continue to bring to you interviews coupled with readings of excerpts from Love Letter to the Earth, written by the beloved peace activist and Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh. This cultural mosaic invites you to go ahead and tuck yourself away somewhere undisturbed, perhaps under a tree, and enjoy this listening experience. We'll catch you on the flip side. Our guest today is April McMurtry.
April is the founder of The Moon is My Calendar and creatress of the New Moon Calendar Journal. She is also a visual artist, mother, and creative lunar guide. Her work reflects her passion for nature-based cycles, wellness, and creative expression. With a background in youth leadership, girls' education, intuitive art, and meditation, April has more than 20 years' experience working in education as a classroom teacher, workshop facilitator, and program coordinator at home and abroad.
April supports people on the path to growth and transformation through meditation, creative process, and awakening cyclical wisdom. She is interested in how healing work is connected to our relationship with the earth. Both of April's grandmothers are first generation born in the United States from England and Ireland. She is a mother of 2 children and resides in the San Francisco Bay Area with 4 generations of her family. Hello, April.
Hi, Addison. Nice to meet you in this space that you've created.
Indeed, and thank you so much for coming by and talking to us. I am incredibly delighted to be able to have this conversation because I'm just looking forward to it and looking forward to you being able to share with us how we can more clearly be in relationship, inner and outer cycles with the moon.
Yes.
This is a new subject matter, so I may tumble on some things, but that's the good part about it. You're going to teach me.
I love the beginner's mind. I feel like as a former classroom teacher and just a lifelong learner, that space of beginner's mind where all questions like just bring something to the surface, especially as it's like landscape that I've been walking through and looking around and exploring. There's things that I see that maybe I take for granted. And so those questions or those things are like, oh yeah, it can bring me back to that place of beginner's mind.
It is a beautiful space. It's also, for me, really calming. It just, it settles down my internal chatter if I just begin at the beginning every time.
Yeah.
And then see what arises. It actually is really soothing. So can you share with us where you're speaking to us from?
Yes, I am in I'm in a room looking outside, and I'm looking outside to orient myself to the horizons. And knowing that I'm in Northern California in the, what's referred to as the San Francisco Bay Area, and is the land tended to by so many Native peoples for so long, in this very recent development of housing in a suburb.
Oh, wow.
So I live under 2 oak trees, and those oak trees are more than 200 years old. And so I'm constantly reminded of this time before the present moment when things were very different. So having the past be present through the presence of these trees is just this reminder. So I'm in the town where I was born and raised, and I have returned to raise my children with 4 generations of our family.
That is so beautiful. I love the feel of that, the feel of oak trees that are over 200 years old, a few generations of your family, you returning there. That has all the elements of pure beauty to me.
Thank you. I resisted the returning. I'm like, new
Yeah,
horizons.
good luck.
Yeah, right. I know. I got pulled back. Yeah.
Good luck. Oh, so I've just begun to welcome the moon is my calendar as a practice, just beginning in January. And I do have to say it is just richly layered, and also it's been incredibly surprising how I've become aware of how I've not been in alignment or relationship with the moon cycles. So I'm finding it beautifully challenging. I think is how I want to express that. Just beautifully challenging. So I would love to learn how you created the moon is my calendar, and just how did it come about? It's meticulously and beautifully done. It's inspiring on, like I said, many different layers. So I would love to hear that.
Yeah, there are so many threads leading to what this creation has become. And so tracing some of those threads back was finding that connection with the moon through meeting on the new moon with my dear friend and colleague Sita Davis. She opened up her living room on the new moon for gatherings, and often it was just me and her. And it established this rhythm and this anchor, no matter what day the new moon fell on, like a Tuesday or a Sunday, and just honoring and respecting, like, okay, the new moon, the moon does not fit into the boxes of our Monday, Tuesday, Wednesdays. There's a different rhythm, a different kind of flow that's happening. And it was many, many years of meeting and setting our own intentions, and just really kind of, I guess, connecting in a way to orient ourselves as new mothers, and as like all the upheaval in our own personal lives.
Right.
So there was no plan to like, we were both teaching at the time, and there wasn't like a plan to start a business or make a calendar. Although I love calendars. I think there's just this deep love of, like, especially, being a classroom teacher for so many years, like my teacher planner, I would make every year myself and take it to the binder and get it bound. 'Cause nothing quite matched what I wanted as a representation to experience time in a way that felt, and so I was always just with calendars, I think, always kind of looking like, what is something that represents the way I experience time? So these kinds of flowing together of these, both this connection to personal practice and self-study and support of the cycles of growth and change, transformation. coming into confluence with that paper material representation of time.
Wow. So did you have to sit under the moon on a regular basis and then just chart? I'm trying to visualize this, right? And then just chart the cycles, which we'll get to that after in a little bit, but then chart it and then try and match what might go with each cycle or phase. It's fascinating process. Like I said, like I go through the calendar every day and I just looking at the flow of it, which is remarkable. And like I said, it's challenging. So I'm wondering how many iterations did you guys have to go through?
Yeah, I have this somewhere. 2014 in the winter of 2014, it was like go time. But the year before that, I'd actually started drawing this sort of a maybe prototype for circular time. I remember sitting actually on Halloween, and I was not up for doing the trick-or-treating supervision with my children, and I was sitting with my dad, kind of holding down the fort, and just drawing and sketching, how can I show a week as a circle? What would that look like? And what are seasonal elements to that? And so, I did it, and then the new year came and I hadn't made anything. And sometimes in the creative process, that might feel like a waste. Like, I had this idea for something and I made it, but I didn't quite finish it. And I didn't know how to bring it fully into form. So I put it aside, and then, the next year came around and I was just struck by, okay, it's time to make something with a circle. And really it was to have a tool to hold the practice that Sita and I had started with each other. And I looked other places, and there were some circular charts, like kind of blank circles for charting the menstrual cycle. And even when I tried to use that and like fill in the dates, I didn't quite like it. It didn't land, but it was a part of the whole process of trying out circular ways of connecting with time. And then I drew this watercolor of like, okay, here's the pie, here's the divisions. Like that year in 2014, winter solstice was on the new moon. And so those two things coincided and aligned in a way that I didn't know at the time. That happens every 19 years, about that the phase will return to the same day. And so I just drew a dark circle up at the top, and I was like, okay, this new moon, everything starts in the dark and everything comes out of the unknown spaces. And then I showed that watercolor to my husband, and I was like, you know how to do, you're self-taught in InDesign and other Adobe programs. Can you help me translate this?
Oh, that's cool.
So it was that exchange of something that was very fluid with needing structure and order. And like you said, I think that meticulous precision to make it not like this wobbly watercolor, that's a very different feeling. But I wanted something that was, that really allowed for anyone who was working with it to bring their own, have the structure very clear and spacious and open and uncluttered.
I love that.
So there's an invitation to engage. And after a number of years of working with my husband, for him coming home from a full-time job and then like, honey, can we sit down? It's time to make next year's. There came a time where it was time to hire a designer to work with, which is very exciting.
I love that. The creative process we can never really pinpoint, right, outside of ourselves, but working with the moon as an element and then the time that we've created, it just brings up so many avenues, I would say.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I noticed as we were, my collective, we were talking about what we wanted to talk to you about and going through the calendar, and is what I notice is that this is a foreign language to a lot of people. That we're living in this very fast-paced and extremely destructive, increasingly destructive society we're experiencing at the moment. And it seems that we've turned time into a bully. Well, that's been what I've been witnessing, and also experiencing for myself. So I guess I want to ask you if this is related to us being out of alignment or rhythm with these cycles of the moon.
Yeah, I think with linear time, there is kind of inevitably that scarcity of that, or a feeling of scarcity that then can be bring us out of balance. And all societies that honor cycles, there's a sense of returning, and so that connection is so clear. What our relationship with time is, a really special and I would say sacred relationship. And to be, born and raised into a society that emphasizes linear time and cuts us off from that cycle of that continuity. There's a lot of suffering that comes from that, and scrambling, and kind of, I don't know, when you said that, even the way that time is talked about,
right?
That's a relationship worth repairing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that pace of having it, at least I noticed for myself when I started to repair that, my relationship with time was the speed at which I had just allowed time to be the first thing and the last thing and the most thing that I thought about. Everything was related to how much time, how little time, how fast, can we get there? And is tomorrow, is this day over yet? I mean, just every single thing seemed to have time at its foundation. And I felt suffering is a good word, subtle, suffering of that as a way of moving with my life.
Wow.
Yeah. So,
and it does create that urgency, which often the urgency that comes from scarcity. And with the lunar cycle, and I wonder if this is your experience of just, beginning one cycle, watching it, participating in it as it unfolds, and then comes to a close, and beginning another cycle. What that can, the shifts that can, subtle, right? It's
very subtle.
Yeah, it's subtle.
I mean, like I said earlier, like the patience that I think that I already have a lot of patience, but the patience to look at it on a daily basis, on a moment by moment basis, right? So we could start, okay, the cycle of the month, and then the week, and then the day of the week, and then the day, and then the hour, and then the moment, right? And then have that beginner's mind, that open spaciousness to allow something else to emerge, and not Tuesday's just Tuesday and I have to have, this podcast recording in by blah, 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 blah. Yeah. So, and that takes a lot of care, personal care, to want to be able to do that. And I know the outcome has been, I think, like I said, is this, just a flow, a much more natural flow, and a calming down, a real calming down.
Yeah, it's almost like, it's a meditation in itself. There's a as the moon is a companion. I mean, it's the closest body that we know of to Earth that that orbits us. That's like there as a companion visiting all of the skies day and night. I mean, I imagine it and feel that presence as this. Um, I experience it as a kind of a weaving or this moon thread of connection. I've heard it written about, just like as a this kind of umbilical cord connection of being a part of us, a part of the earth that, that's visiting as a companion. And so that meditation of how can I be with this companion who is a time teller from beginning of time for humans, to be with that kind of time.
That brings me to this question about if you could share with us the phases of the moon, what causes them, and that expression that is often used, time is man-made, and where people go, well, with that, you almost just shake your head. Yeah. And so let's see if we could tie that together.
Yeah. The construction of time and how that then can be controlled in these different ways, and opening up more to that spaciousness and that really the eternal time of lunar cycles. That there are cycles that existed before me and there'll be cycles after me. And it's not this point A to point B. The phases then really, there's a way of, there's different lenses to look through to see what are the phases and what is the point of the perspective, right? So from the point of view of the sun, the moon is always full. The sun is just shining in all directions. And so facing the earth, it's always day, and facing the moon is always the full moon. And yet from our perspective on earth, then we get the opportunity to see that angle of relationship, because it is all relationship. And it's a way of connecting with time as a relationship. And so that angle really of separation between the sun and the moon as the moon orbits the earth, that angle changes what phase we see. And I'll be honest, for my beginner's mind at the beginning of this journey, it's easier to connect with the full moon because it's very obvious. Oh,
right.
The sun is setting. There's the moon full. I can see it, lights up the night. Okay. And yet that's one phase of, 28, 29, 30, 29, 30 days of a lunar cycle. What happens then if many people just acknowledge that full moonness in themselves, the full moonness of the moon in our, in the sky? It's the most obvious. And so as we talk about things being subtle, there has to be a curiosity of what else, what are the other phases? What else is going on that maybe I'm not seeing? And so the journey of the lunar cycle, each lunar cycle, the experience can be like a lifetime in itself. Birth, life, death, rebirth, life. And so the new moon then is a reuniting. And that was when I said the beginner's mind, I was like, where is the moon when the moon is new? What exactly? Why can't I see the moon? What's happening? People talk about the moon going unseen in the night sky or something like that for the new moon. But the new moon doesn't even appear at night because the moon is rising with the sun and traveling in the day. And so that association then with the moon and night is actually in the whole cycle. And this can bring us into relationship with balance, is to see that balance isn't always in balance, that the extreme of the new moon and the extreme of the full moon then has these 2 quarter moons where we just see half. And the quarter moons are half in the daytime sky and half in the nighttime sky. The new moon is all in the day sky, and the full moon is all in the night sky. And there's this alternation. And so that kind of balance of this shifting from and rebalancing, and then like resetting at the new moon, and then beginning again. And so there is a subtlety to it of noticing, okay, what are the things that can be wrapped up and sort of come to an end, so that when there is a chance to begin new, my plate's not already full, or I'm not already overcommitted or said yes to a million things, that it's actually clearing out space so that a new moon can feel like, oh, here's this fresh beginning again. So I hope that, the phases, I hope that just in seeing that relationship and the orbiting, sometimes it might appear like the moon, like that there's no shadow. The moon is just reflecting light from the sun at different degrees of an angle. And then the part that we don't see is actually reflecting back the void from the cosmos. And the only shadows that happen are during eclipses. And so it's not necessarily like the shadowed part of the moon. When we see a phase, it's the great void, the great unknown that's going to be filled in. And that's the lunar cycle. It's like it's filling in with light. It's filling in with light, the unknown. Something's being revealed. And to have a personal practice. And it doesn't get old. I mean, the insights that come through in just this way of connecting with a circle.
You are listening to the Emerging World Project podcast, What Are You Doing Here? Our guest today is April McMurtry. April is the founder of The Moon is My Calendar. April's guidance supports people on the path to growth and transformation through meditation, creative process, and awakening cyclical wisdom. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. We hear we're stuck, or I'm stuck, I just feel stuck. Mm-hmm. But if you look at it in this circular way, and this space will open up on the new moon, and you're open for that, then there's really no stuckness to be stuck in.
Mm-hmm. And that it is a wonderful way, in the ways that the moon can teach each of us certain lessons that we are learning, to look to the moon for, even asking the moon, how do you not get stuck?
Mm-hmm,
because of that constant movement and the constant, changing of perspective and orbit around the earth. It's not like, okay, I'm in my full moon, I'm just going to like press pause or stop and just stay here because I like it here. There's like a choice in that. There is this invitation of you keep flowing, unfolding, and this phase will come back around. And that's a kind of a deepening of trust that I learned for sure. There's so much, my life is very, very different than before, working with the moon and working with this sort of like flattened representation of lunar time in the circle.
Do you have a memory of a prominent experience of transformation or healing?
One that came actually before creating the calendar was during an eclipse. And so those kinds of sudden shifts and sudden changes, in the way that eclipses seem to come out of nowhere. Actually just being present with the moon. And I know in a number of traditions and cultures, you're not supposed to look at the moon or the sun during an eclipse because of not making a spectacle of something that is for the moon like an injury or seen as like a being eclipsed or temporarily like out of commission, to kind of respect that. And Vedic astrologers will talk about that. But here I was on the hood of a car looking at the full, the total lunar eclipse. And what came to me was like, there's no separation. There's no going away. There's no like, death is not an ending. This eclipse just was, this appearance of loss or appearance of separation and disappearing. And yet there was just this thin veil, and there was just a shadow, and that the presence is still there. And there were many layers of healing for me in that moment. And I think that probably just opened me up to, wow, what else is there? What else is there to learn? What else can the moon teach me?
Yeah.
And really, in the teaching of how to be more lunar. And maybe I've got swung like maybe a little far in that direction where I'm like working my way back more towards a solar active, action oriented, because being connected with the moon and lunar rhythms and the flow is to be in a place to be receptive, to be quiet and listen.
Do you feel like this kind of dovetails really nicely about if we are cultivating a daily practice with the circular calendar, how would that, how does it feel like that might manifest in a deeper relationship to the earth?
Yeah. I mean, that's for the moon kind of mirrors back our relationship with the earth. And my, it's a lunar calendar, but it's our earth is our point of reference and our home. And if the moon can remind us to notice the cycles and the seasons around us and the subtle shifts, how often, like you were mentioning, the experience of time, that feeling of panic of, oh my gosh, it's already almost summer. Oh, what happened to the time? Like, where did it go? And this mindfulness of phase by phase, like phase by phase, things unfold. And so those kinds of sudden surprises or shocks are out of nowhere. Like, oh my gosh, I'm 40, whatever. Like, how did that happen? Where did the time go? When we're like living in this phase by phase way of appreciating the unfolding of each lunar cycle, there's a sweetness to that relationship. And being in the, it's a way of cultivating present moment awareness. And many traditions and practices have different ways to do that. How am I present in this moment? And so for me, in the questions that I often share in some of the classes and circles are asking two very simple and like deceptively simple questions. And I'll admit, I even think like there must be something more. It's got to be more complicated than this. It couldn't be this easy. But it apparently is. The first question being, where is the moon right now? And how do I go about answering that in this moment? And whenever I can't find the moon or I'm not quite sure, I feel disoriented. And so it's an invitation for orienting. Okay, well, where is my body right now? Like what place on the earth am I? Is it day or night? When was the last time I saw the moon? What phase are we waxing or waning? Where's the sun? And where's that relationship between sun and moon? And so it's deceptively simple. And so, if we sit here right now, it's the more obvious is if it were a full moon, okay, well, the moon is directly opposite the sun. So wherever the sun is, the moon is going to be. If it's noon, then the moon is like directly on the other side, sort of at that midnight point of the earth. But the in-betweens, it's a feeling into, how can I feel into this relationship? And so the very first calendar and the very first cycle, I committed myself every day to find the moon. Looking and seeing like, okay, where's the moon today? And thankfully, most of that cycle had clear skies. And so this is a weather dependent. Mm-hmm.
I was going to ask you if you did it at the same time. I do it when I remember,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I'll be on a hike and then I'll be like, oh wait, where's the moon?
Mm-hmm.
And then I just try and sustain. If I can't see it, I try and obviously pull up the information that I have,
Mm-hmm.
and then sustain my curiosity about
Mm-hmm.
where it is instead of, oh, I can't see it, and then off I go.
Mm-hmm.
There's a deer or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So that sustaining the is part of the process too.
Yeah.
But I
It's
like the idea
mm-hmm.
of maybe choosing a certain time every day to start to get you in the flow of asking yourself.
I know, which doesn't quite work because,
Weather.
well, weather, but also because the moon's not going to be in the sky at that time
Right.
at each point in the cycle. And so to actually see the moon then is to kind of plan ahead. So I would have these moon dates and I would take my children out, and, years into it, they would say, I'd be like, oh, I want to show you something. They're like, Mom, is it the moon? Is it the moon again? I'm like, but it never gets old. It never gets old. Like, really, really, Mom? Oh. But to make these dates and have certain kind of landmarks or lookout points, and knowing and planning ahead, at the beginning of the cycle, the first day, usually the moon's not visible. And then the next day, the moon's only visible for about an hour. And then the next day, the moon's visible for about 2 hours at sunset. And the next day, about 3 hours at sunset.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's these kind of particular windows where, that's a whole rhythm in itself that for me was, it's making a date, it's making this like any relationship we have that we want to have intimacy with, kind of the
Getting to know.
Yeah, the getting to know, and getting to know on the other person's terms, or in this case, on the moon's terms.
Mm-hmm.
Not, and I've written about this before, but it's really like, because many of us are used to on demand. What is not on demand at this point? Like
Right.
Uber Eats and like millions of channels, I can, watch anything on demand. What has that done? Well, the moon can take us out of that, like, very human-centered, snap my fingers, Amazon drops the box on the porch on demand. I mean, and I see it with my children. So my youngest, there was something she'd saved up for, she really wanted. And, I was getting it for her. And she thought, like, when you click the button to buy it on the computer, that it appeared on the doorstep. And I was like, no.
But this is really cute little butterfly.
Oh my gosh. And I was like, there is so much work to do, especially for a younger generation where it is like a snap of a finger. So the moon is not on demand. And how can I, operate more sort of on the moon's terms to get a feel for something that the lunar time is happening simultaneous with the linear time. It's just that, like you said, learning a language, if we don't understand the sounds or the signs of something, then sometimes maybe it just doesn't exist or it's out of our awareness.
Right.
So there is a listening, and part of that tracking and charting is that kind of curiosity. And, when you said like sustaining the curiosity, where it's like, oh, I don't know. Okay, I'll be with that not knowing rather than, I have to know, because knowing is can be some form of controlling in some ways.
Right. So for folks that don't have the calendar in front of them just yet, what could be a few things where they could begin to come into alignment with this rhythm of the moon?
Yeah. So, when I mentioned those questions of where's the moon right now, and the other question is where am I right now, that kind of inner outer connection, sometimes I'll, I think just starting to connect with the new moon, and the new moon is not visible. So it's kind of connecting with, okay, maybe you got to look it up on the computer or an app, or there are many moon calendars. And as I've after creating this and then going back to research and see moon calendars from ancient moon calendars,
Wow.
that it's not anything new. It's very much a repairing, a reviving, finding our relationship in new times, to something that really is as old as time.
Right.
Yeah, starting to just kind of like you said, anything that we want to be in a relationship with, like having a conversation, seeing, different phases of the moon, what each full moon might bring up. That's different each time around, but that's that where am I right now, and that practice of self-study. I actually created, there was a course I was working on, and then things just often happen spontaneously. And I was like, I'm going to record a little audio for each phase of the moon. And
Oh,
so
neat.
I woke up. It feels like this PhD project for me with
That's really neat.
all of the, kind of distilling and digesting, and then being in the present to see what wants to come through. So I woke up every morning really early and just, hit record and was like, okay, day one of the moon. What is the feeling of a day one? And how does that relate to the parallel cycles of beginnings? And so I have that available, which is really kind of a fun, creative journey to go on for that listening.
I would love to listen to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I love that.
And it's, and then it comes back the next cycle. And then to see, okay, this is my language of communicating these days and phases of the moon, hopefully in a way, really with all the work that I'm doing, is like the way that I know the moon is intimate and personal, and how to help others have that intimate personal relationship with the moon and sort of have something to bounce that off of. Whereas maybe my description of day one, as you listen to that and kind of feel into it and go through, maybe your day one has some different kind of energy or flavor, and allowing for that, so we each get our own experience of it.
Right.
But we need to start somewhere or have some points of reference. So that's
it's a good starting. I mean, it's a good starting point. I'm feeling like this. I don't know how to say it, but maybe the tone of where we're beginning to restore these relationships is finally coming into. We're starting to hear it in a different way. At least a lot of the people that I'm being around are starting to hear this, right? So we're tuning our hearing faculties.
Yeah. And there is, because the moon is like super popular, which is, it's funny because when I first started the moon, the moon is my calendar that had other iterations before it. Like I made the first calendar without even having a name I just called it the New Moon Calendar Journal. There wasn't like that. It kind of came later in its unfolding. It was starting before having everything ready. There was no logo. There was no any of that. It's like, just make a circle. Like, let's just start with some form that's not the final form it's going to be, but starting, somewhere. It's amazing. But I felt like that whisper to me to create it was whispered to many people at the same time or around about that time, so that there became more and more and more. Everything can have sort of a different lens or focus. And that there are some ways that I see like describing the phases at a more superficial level, or more like prescriptive perhaps, of like, what am I supposed to do? It's the new moon. What should I do? And, my question would be to sort of mirror back, like, what are you really feeling? Like, where are you at? Is it a time to really slow down and take things off your plate and, be really quiet and really go inward. Or what I've noticed through all the many years of tracking is some new moons, I get such a burst of creative energy and insight that if I was following the formula, I might say like, oh no, I should, I don't know, take a bath or
Right,
whatever.
right.
But when I feel it, I'm like, here it is. Okay. Catch this wave because it's here.
Right. I think about flipping that. Okay, so before I delved into the calendar, I was, or still am, acutely aware of when my creativity is waxing or waning. And I never put it against anything except for, oh my God, like you're here now. I gotta, I'm in the middle of something. But so now, to flip it and now use the moon as the tracker, right? It's a very interesting process. I mean, I will wake up, I'm sure you're the same way. I can wake up in the middle of the night. The moon will wake me in the middle of the night with an idea. And I know, because I know, I know. And I'm like, why? There'll be something will happen. I mean, why am I awake? And I'll get up and I'll walk through the hallway and there's a window and the moon is right in the window. I'm like, gotcha. I gotcha. So maybe this is a little out there, but maybe, we're doing it all the time. It's just about bringing our awareness to it more acutely.
Yeah. And listening, right? Of quieting the mind enough and quieting the stimulation to receive whatever that message is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And things like sleeping enough. I mean, the moon basically is like, if I'm learning from the moon, I had to learn to wind down and sleep, the time for dreaming. And I wasn't before. I would let my creativity like get a second wind and ramp up. And then all of a sudden, like, oh my gosh, like without the sleeping part of it. And so there's that rebalancing of honoring, like, okay, it's time to act on this. And it's time to like, create. And there's that time to like, it's time to wind down. And so knowing that for ourselves and like having that, that container to work within and seeing like the moon, as much as the moon is thought of as like fluctuating and being, what are all the words, inconsistent, kind of these negative things that the moon and more lunar ways of being, the sun is very steady. There's sunrise and sunset, and the moon is having this dance of weaving in and out of day and night. And yet with that weaving, there's this consistency that can help us understand what flow is.
Yeah, I'm beginning to feel that more and more. So thank you. I'm so happy I've discovered that, because I really am. It is really remarkable how much distance there was or is between understanding that and tapping, I don't want to say tapping into it, but definitely aligning with it. So we're going to move to this because we could go on and on and on. You'll come back and we'll have, what did you say the moon was going to be in today for this conversation?
I think I wrote to you to say it was the sun moving into Taurus. So the sun moving in to the season of the earth, and the next new moon will, whatever the sun is in, the moon will be in that same sign. So our next new moon coming up is Taurus.
What we're going to do right now, this is my equivalent to that, the rapid fire question things that people are doing on their podcasts. Well, we don't do that. Okay. We're going to do something else. We're going to put you in a beautiful tight spot. And that is, since this is our, this season, we're doing Love Letter to the Earth by Thich Nhat Hanh series. And we're reading excerpts, and doing reflections. And all of our conversations are going to be about this relationship with the earth and the cosmos, and now our beautiful talk about the moon with you. So I've sent you Love Letter to the Earth number 6, and I would love it if you don't mind reading it for us. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I would love to. I read it to myself earlier, and I started like tearing up and crying. So I was like, okay, maybe if I read it first, I can read it without crying this time. But even crying's good too.
Crying is good.
To really feel it. Okay, so this is Love Letter to the Earth number 6. Our journey of eons. Dear Mother, the moon is a part of you, as beautiful as an angel. She is a kind sister to you, always following you, helping you slow down and keep your balance, and creating tidal rhythms in your body. Our entire solar system is one family, revolving around Father Sun in a joyful and harmonious dance. First, there is Mercury, metallic and cratered, closest to the Sun. Next is Venus, with her intense heat, high-pressure atmosphere, and volcanoes. Then there is you, beloved Mother Earth, the most beautiful of all. Beyond us orbits the red planet, cold and desolate Mars. And after the asteroid belt, there comes the gas giant Jupiter, by far the largest planet of all, attended by an assembly of diverse moons. Beyond Jupiter orbits Saturn, the spectacularly ringed planet, followed by Uranus, tilted on his side after a collision. And finally, distant blue Neptune with his turbulent storms and high winds. Contemplating this splendor, I can see that you, Mother Earth, are the most precious flower in our solar system, a true jewel of the cosmos.
Where did your tears come from when you first read it?
This kind sister of like this, I don't know, this kindness of like following, like something about that there's helpers, like following us around, like, okay, slow down. It's okay to take a deep breath. All of those things that the moon's teaching has brought to me. And I think, in reading these words, that very simple part of being a part of a whole, of something that's way bigger than each of us, and feeling that bigness, feeling that vastness, feeling that uniqueness of what's possible for life on this earth, and why it is life is not at the center, always at the center, right. supporting life, in the ways that Earth just continues to provide in so many ways, and seeing all the ways and why is even that ability to provide and sustain so either taken for granted or intentionally being destroyed.
Right. I can't help but think that the type of work that you're doing, the importance it plays, because all of this behavior, which we're speaking about in terms of destruction towards the very thing that gives us life and is life, of course, stems from this separation, false idea of a separation. And so the work I want to let you know how much I appreciate, and so many people that I've talked to about before our talk appreciate you using your life force to bring this information to people and work with people to help close that gap. It's a true benefit on so many beautiful different levels, and I have great gratitude for you and the work you're doing.
Thank you, Addison. I'm just
Absolutely.
letting that soak in all the ways that I may even take my efforts for granted of it's just this or just that, and seeing the role that it plays in a bigger movement towards reconnection.
Right. A movement towards reconnection. Right. It's a big deal. I'm here to remind everybody this is a big deal.
Yeah.
It's a very big deal. I skipped a question because I was anxious to hear you read the letter because I knew that you would embody it in such a way with a different that I hadn't heard. But you shared with me that you received the book, was it Being Peace or Peace is Every Step? One of them by Thich Nhat Hanh from your grandmother when you were a youngster volunteering in rural Mexico. 2 questions. What were you doing in rural Mexico? Volunteering for what? And how, at that age, you said you were 16, did Thai's teaching speak to you then?
Yeah. Yeah, my grandmother, who is always ahead of her time, at 95, is still does not cease to amaze me. She gave me Being Peace. And this was the second summer that I was volunteering with an organization called Amigos. That's based in Houston, Texas, but has chapters. First, it was all over the US, but now throughout Latin America as well. Amigos de las Americas. And so I was living in a small rancho off the side of a highway to work with. I think the partnering agencies were like Secretary of Health, and we're working on like a sanitation project. The materials never arrived, and we didn't know how to lay bricks, and so we were very like, "What are we doing here?" So what we ended up doing was we had like language exchange classes, and worked with kids at the clinic that was in town, doing, just like whatever the interest was in, we would find a way to like teach about it or share about it or have some exchange about it. And got to stay, with a family with 13 kids. And that shift of perspective, I feel like at a young age, being, so far from home and also just really being in the hands of this community in so many ways. But yeah, the book and the time for contemplation, especially since we couldn't do anything, the materials, for 2 months, like the first month, like no materials showed up. So we had to what is our purpose here? Like, how can we contribute in some way? And really it was through relationship with the families and with the other youth that were there.
Wow.
And having that book and having those words, I went back to after Thich Nhat Hanh's passing, I went to my grandma's and I had just seen it on social media. So I figured my grandma had not seen the news yet. And she pulled out all of her books and just kind of, sat, and she reread a lot of the books and just shared with me. And so I went back to Being Peace. And I was like, what seeds were in there that were planted at that age? And really what stood out, and I remember reading, was about seeing the sunshine in a piece of paper.
Wow.
And the whole world view of interconnection and non-duality, and everything is a part of everything. There is no separation. The way that he writes and the way that he spoke goes to such the heart right away. The simplicity.
Yes.
It's just in the simplicity. But seeing the sunshine in a piece of paper and seeing, for me in being in that community, working with and meeting and getting to know men in that community who had crossed over over the border imposed between our two countries, between Mexico and the US, and seeing no separation of like, these are the same people who were like demonized in the media. And there's no reason. I mean, apparently there is a reason, and who does that serve to have that be the narrative? You know, to meet husbands and fathers and brothers and hear their stories and see seeing the sides. And it's like, why are there sides?
Right.
So yeah, I went back and read that and I was like, wow, so much of this is so foundational. And I even, in reading Being Peace again, I was like, what other teachings are needed? It's all in here.
Isn't that amazing? And what I really can resonate with is this going back to the teachings. For somebody, I studied his teachings, 20 some odd years ago, and have continued, but at some point, maybe some other type of teachings came through in a different way. So after his passing, in the same way, I went to reread. I looked on my bookshelves and I have everything.
Wow.
And I went to reread them, and I came to the similar place that you are. And that was, this is so simple. The simplicity, seeing the sun in a piece of paper, seeing the cloud in your cup of tea, right? And just the power of that, letting it be okay to be simple. It's okay. It's okay that it's simple. And then sitting in that. So
yeah. And I think the brilliance of, what it is to kind of demonize an other and have that duality and the experience that we can have when there's a kind of choosing sides, taking sides, and separating further. I think his work and his life was so unifying in so many ways, as a force and an energy for not othering.
Right.
As othering is a kind of not easy way out, but just the way that he writes about, especially in this book, but just not sidestepping some of those hard conversations. But coming back to, and as I was reading it now, because I see everything through the lens of the moon and that language of the non-duality of within the lunar cycle, there is the whole, and there are polarities, and those polarities are a part of a whole, and they're not separate or outside of that they exist to be part of the wholeness and the entirety and the integrity. So in the rereading, that was something that really struck me in connecting back with the moon.
Oh, this has been a really beautiful and delightful conversation. I look forward to it again.
To be continued. Yes, thank you for holding this space and yeah, for inviting a conversation and the reminder. And I feel so grateful to have this chance to share, and in the ways that being re-inspired in the purpose and the meaning of the work, I know it's made a huge difference in my own life. And so whenever I hear stories of like what you shared in your own personal and daily practice, that it reminds me of the things that I'm willing to do to keep making and producing this calendar, and to keep sharing and to keep showing up, like, so that it continues.
Can you share with us, how do we reach you? And how, through reaching you, can learn more about the moon as our calendar?
Yeah. So the website is themoonismycalendar.com. And I'm actually about to revive a podcast I started a couple years ago, Between the Moon, conversations about self-study and relationship with cycles. So that will be unfolding, available soon.
Thank you again so very much. Have yourself a beautiful rest of the day. Where's the moon right now?
Where is the moon right now?
Thank you for stopping by. You can help us spread the word about What Are You Doing Here by sharing this episode or leaving a review in your favorite podcast app. Reviews help potential listeners see that our show is worth their time, and every single one makes a difference. For a deeper look at what the Emerging World Project is up to, head on over to emergingworldproject.org. The Emerging World Project studios are on Tongva land.